Alright, now check this out. There is some wild talk floating around claiming that Iraq is about to dump a ton of US dollars, causing the USD to crash and sending the Iraqi dinar soaring. Apparently, there's some big shots in the Middle East, coordinating with Iran and Russia to ditch the dollar. Now let's put on our detective hats and separate the wheat from the chaff. We need to analyze all sides of this story to figure out what's really going on. Remember, knowledge is power, so don't miss out on this info. Let's dive right in. Now, first off, it's super important to understand that global economies don't operate on gut feelings or impulsive decisions. When countries decide to buy, sell, or hold currencies, it's based on careful analysis, forecasts, and strategic goals. It's not like flipping a coin or betting on sports. Countries consider things like inflation, economic growth, and global partnerships before making moves with their money. So when we hear about Iraq dumping US dollars, we need to ask some serious questions. What's the source of this info? How much money are we talking about, and what does it actually mean for the IQD? Is it a part of a bigger plan? As we dig deeper, let's also talk about something called the petrodollar, which is basically the global system where oil is bought and sold using the US dollar. It's been around since the 1970s, and many countries rely on it. However, there's a growing trend to use other currencies like the euro or pound sterling for oil purchases. And recently, China and Russia have been pushing for using national currencies in bilateral trade to reduce reliance on the US dollar. This movement is gaining steam. As more countries join in, the influence of the petrodollar could weaken over time, which could affect the value of the US dollar in foreign exchange markets. This is important to understand because it shows that the world is evolving and changing. The US dollar isn't invincible, and there are forces out there that want to shake things up. So when we hear about Iraq dumping dollars, we need to keep this global context in mind. This might not be just a random decision, but a sign of bigger changes happening around the world. But let's zoom in on Iraq specifically. Their economy is heavily reliant on oil exports. Oil accounts for around 90% of their export earnings and a significant chunk of their government revenue. This means that fluctuations in oil prices and demand can have a big impact on the Iraqi dinar. In recent times, Iraq has been taking steps to diversify their economy and reduce their dependence on oil. They're focusing on sectors like agriculture, manufacturing, and services to create more jobs and boost non-oil exports. But let's be real, transitioning away from oil is a long-term game. It takes time, effort, and smart planning. So for now, oil still plays a huge role in Iraq's economy, and by extension, the value of their currency. So how does all this info fit together? Let's break it down. First off, we need to consider Iraq's relationship with the United States. Historically, they haven't always been the best, especially during the Iraq War. But in recent years, things have been improving. The US is helping Iraq stabilize their currency and banking system, which is essential for their economic recovery. Plus, the US is a major buyer of Iraqi oil, making it a key player in Iraq's economy. So it would make sense for Iraq to upset the apple cart and risk losing a valuable ally and trading partner. Next, let's look at Iraq's ties with Iran and Russia. Both countries have significant influence in the region and have been involved in conflicts in Iraq. Now, it's true that these countries have expressed interest in developing alternative payment systems to avoid US sanctions. This includes using local currencies instead of the US dollar in bilateral trade. But that doesn't mean they're replanning a massive ditch of the US dollar that will tank its value. It's more likely a way to protect their own interests and reduce reliance on the US financial system, especially given their history of strained relationships with the West. Finally, we need to think about the logistics of dumping US dollars. Let's say Iraq, Iran, and Russia team up and agree to use only their national currencies in trade. How would that work in practice? It's not like they can magically make the US dollar worthless. Even if they stopped using the dollar, there's still a ton of it out there in circulation. Plus, the US is one of the largest economies in the world, so it's not easy to ignore or boycott completely. Any major move away from the dollar would send shockwaves through the entire global economy and financial system. And we're talking about major banks, governments, and international organizations feeling the pain, not just Iraq. So it is hard to imagine a scenario where a few countries could dump enough dollars to tank its value overnight. We also need to consider what exactly dumping dollars means. Does it mean selling off all their dollar holdings? That's highly unlikely because countries keep a portion of their reserves in stable and trusted currencies like the US dollar. It's like putting your eggs in different baskets to reduce risk. So it's more likely that Iraq is diversifying its currency holdings rather than ditching the dollar altogether. That means investing in a mix of currencies like the euro or pound sterling to balance out their portfolio. This helps reduce risk and exposure to any single currency, which is smart financial planning. Let's also look at Iraq's own economic situation. Right now, their currency is pegged to a basket of currencies, primarily the US dollar. This means the value of the dinar is fixed relative to the dollar, which provides stability and predictability. But it also limits the ability of the Iraqi dinar to appreciate or depreciate based on market forces. So if Iraq dumped US dollars and started trading with other currencies, it could seriously mess with the value of their own currency. It might seem appealing to think that this would boost the dinar, but it could actually lead to chaos and instability, making it harder for Iraq to conduct international trade and hurting their economy. Now, we're not saying that nothing will change. The global economy is always evolving, and it's possible that Iraq may eventually drop the peg and let the dinar float freely on the market. But that's a complex decision with serious implications. It's not something they would do on a whim or based on rumors or speculation. Any change to the dinar's value or trading status would be carefully considered, thoroughly planned, and widely announced. Now, let's talk about the real reason why Iraq might want to dump some US dollars. Recently, tensions have been high between the US and Iran, leading to military conflicts. This has made some countries, including Iraq, nervous about keeping too many US dollars on hand. It's like being concerned that your savings might be at risk if things get out of hand. So they're looking to diversify their holdings and reduce exposure to the US dollar. This way, they have a safety net of other currencies to rely on if there are any spillover effects from the conflict. It's all about managing risk and protecting their own economic interests. But let's step back and look at the bigger picture. The US dollar is the world's dominant reserve currency and is backed by one of the largest and most stable economies out there. Sure, there are risks when holding any currency, but the US dollar is generally seen as a safe bet. So it's hard to imagine Iraq single-handedly tanking its value through any currency swap. Even if they dumped all their dollars, it wouldn't make much of a dent in the global market. But what about those sneaky central banks buying up all the dinars? Well, there's no evidence or reports suggesting this is happening. Central banks usually focus on major currencies and don't put much weight on smaller ones like the dinar. Plus, buying a ton of dinars would only increase their value, which wouldn't help Iraq's goal of boosting trade. So after all this digging, what's the verdict? Is the US dollar doomed? Absolutely not. Is the Iraqi dinar about to soar? It's unlikely. Are central banks secretly hoarding dinars? Not likely. The bottom line, global economies don't make snap decisions. The US dollar is deeply ingrained in the global financial system and not going anywhere fast. Any significant currency move would have major repercussions, and not just for Iraq. Plus, it's hard to imagine a few countries dumping dollars could tank its value when it's backed by the world's largest economy. Don't fall for sensational claims or rumors. Stay informed and make smart decisions. Knowledge is power, my friends. So what do you think about all this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.